Kaltei oitesula uniprote. Hello and welcome to part 11 of the small NAPB course. Today we'll start with infixes. So today is Infix lesson 1. So, like you already saw in the title, today is Infix lesson 1. So there will actually be more, 4 to be precise. So let's first look at what actually these 4 different parts are. So part 1, introduction, tense and aspect. So we look at what actually is an infix, where to put the infixes in a verb, and which infixes do there exist. So basically what we do today is we get the overview over the whole topic, what is it, how to use it, and so we can directly use what we learned. We will learn some first small infixes, namely when does an action happen and is it finished or not, so tense and aspect. In part 2, we will talk about the rest of the position 1 infixes. Don't worry about the position stuff, we will learn about this today. But yeah, so part 2 will be position 1 infixes. So we talked about the subjunctive, then about some combined infixes, and we will talk about the participles, so adjectives that are made from verbs. So to hunt becomes hunted or hunting. Then in part 3 we will talk about position 2, so we'll talk about positive and negative mood, the wangati gameya with the A in there, I see you and I'm happy about it. We will talk about the inferential, so to infer that something happened, and we will talk about the ceremonial infix. And lastly, in part 4, we will talk about position 0, or also called pre-first infixes, so about the causative, you cause someone else to do something, the reflexive, you, for example, see yourself, and about the epic, which is the combination of the two. Like you probably already figured, today we are here. So, let's directly start. What actually is an infix? So, an infix is a syllable that goes inside a word. Here are some terms for those who are interested in linguistics. So we have affix, which basically is a morpheme, so a part of speech that, the smallest part of speech that has a meaning, that goes somehow added to a word, so it's basically the term for all of them together. Then we have a prefix that goes before a word, like for example fe or za, which you already learned. A suffix that goes after a word, so for example tsiep, the L and T endings and so on. And we have the infix, which is what we're learning today, that go inside the word. Just so we have an overview of all the things that exist, and today we're talking about infixes. Actually, there's also a circumfix, so it goes around the word, but NAPB doesn't really have them, so let's not talk about them. And what is very important, infixes only go into verbs. So we had it before that, for example, case endings, they only go after nouns. The a to connect an adjective to a noun only goes on an adjective, and the infixes only go into verbs. That's very important to keep in mind. And they have various different functions, like for example, stating tense, so when does something happen, aspect, is it finished or not, mood, and also other grammatical functions, but you will learn all of these in the coming few lessons. Let's talk about infix positions, because now you know an infix has to go into a verb, but where to put it? I mean, in a long verb there are a lot of places where you could put an infix. Most important thing to keep in mind, they always go before vowels, and then there are different infix positions. So first we have one that is before the last vowel in the verb. That's what we call infix position 2. Then we have one that goes before the second last vowel. That's what we call infix position 1. It is worth mentioning that at this point we don't have root verbs that have more than 2 syllables. So before the second last vowel actually always means before the first vowel, and then before the last vowel always means, yeah, before the last vowel or before the second vowel. So why not go from the front? Why not just say before the first vowel, before the second vowel? Yes, that would work at this point, but there is actually the possibility that we might get a verb with 3 syllables where this rule applies, and we know that the actual rule behind it is that we go from the back. So we start with the last vowel, then we go to the second last vowel. So I want to teach you the actual rule, even though it maybe sounds a bit more complicated. Even though, of course, currently, with the verbs we currently have, we could also just follow the easier rule to start from the front and say infix position 1 before the first vowel, infix position 2 before the second vowel. But just keep in mind that the actual rule behind it is we start from the back. And then there's also a third one, before 1, That's the pre-first or zero. There's a bit of a debate if it exists, because some people are like, no, it's just pull before infix position 1. We don't need the extra infix position here. And some call it the pre-first, some call it infix position 0. I just show it here to make it a bit clear that we have two different positions here. The reasoning for that is that per position you can only have one infix. And because of this, we need another position before 1, because there are some things that can be combined. And also I just like to make it clear where to exactly put something. But yeah, pre-first or 0 just always goes directly in front of 1. So here are some examples. We have taron, to hunt. I marked the vowels here, so A and O. So we take position 2 and put it in front of the last vowel, which is the O. And we take 1, put it in front of the second last vowel, which is the A. And then we put the 0 in front of that one. Or you see in dictionaries, there are sometimes these dots that show where infixes are. And most of them, or actually all of them, only show 1 and 2. They don't show 0, because 0 just goes in front of the first dot. Yeah, penk O. There we have the E and the O. So the second position goes in front of the O. And 0 and 1 go before the E. Pult E. There we have again the 2 in front of the last vowel, so the E. And the 0 and 1 in front of the L. So here you see also pseudovowels, so L and R count as vowels. So you put actually infixes in front of them. If a verb starts with a vowel, then infixes can actually still go before them. So then they are more like prefixes. They don't go inside the word but before the verb. But yeah, we just follow the normal rules. So for example, inan, we follow just a rule. 2 goes in front of the second vowel, so A, or the last vowel, A. And then 0 and 1 go in front of the second last vowel, which is the E. The E happens to be the first letter in this word. We don't care. We put the infix in front of it, so the 0 and 1 actually are in front of the word. Same for the omum. So we get the 2 in front of the U and 0 and 1 in front of the O. In one-syllable words, it's very easy. Everything just goes in front of the only vowel we have. So fil, everything goes before the E. Il is a very interesting example because it just starts with a vowel and we only have one vowel. So all infixes actually are prefixes. Everything goes in front of the verb. And paum, everything goes before the au. Note that here the au actually together is one vowel. It's a diphthong. So everything goes just in front of that. There are some exceptions. They are predictable, kind of, but still need to be learned in some way. And the exception basically always is based on that in compound words, so verbs that are built up from multiple words, only the verb part gets infixes. So what do I mean? For example, kaltesi and iraiosi, so C verbs. C verbs are made from the C, which is a verb or a kind of verb, helping verb, meaning to do something. And another word, so for example, iraio is a noun, the fang. And since iraio is a noun, it cannot take infixes. So everything goes into the C because the C is the verb part of the C verb. So very straightforward, we just put everything in the C. But it's not only C verbs, sadly. There are also some where it's less obvious. For example, these two. Ralpeng. Ralpeng means to translate. It comes from ral, which is the meaning, it's a noun, and peng, to tell, which is a transitive verb. And like you maybe can guess, everything then goes into the peng, because the ral cannot have infixes. It's a noun. Of course, in the new combined word, actually the whole thing is a verb, but still, everything goes into the peng, into the verb part of this compound verb. And the same goes for mawei bei. Mawei is an adjective, means calm. Bei is to wait. So mawei bei together means to be patient, and everything goes into the pei. All the infixes go into the pei part, because that's our verb part in this compound verb. And then there is one very weird exception, which is senke. Senke is extremely weird because here we have something we have literally nowhere else, namely an infix in front of a consonant. You see, the infix position 1 is kind of predictable. It's in front of the A, the first A. But second one actually goes before the K. Why is that? Senke comes from Sene Ke. So originally the infixes were both in the Sene, but then the second E von Sene disappeared because they shortened it. And then the infix that used to be in front of the second E there just went in front of the K. So we get Senke with this very irregular pattern of the second infix position being in front of the K and the first one being in front of the A. So yeah, keep that in mind. It's very weird. It's literally the only verb where this happens, but it happens. What if you don't know where the infix positions of a verb are and forgot the rule or are not sure if there's an exception for a verb? You can just look in the dictionary. So here's, for example, in Reikon, you see infix positions, it's shown with these dots. Here it is in Fueo, there it's with the small dots on the bottom. Sometimes on Fueo the thingies are a bit too small and then they don't show the infix position. You can just click on the word and then you get to the big overview where they show the infix slots with two different things. So once with the slots like I do with 0, 1 and 2 and once again with the dots. Some dictionaries actually don't show the infix for every word. Why? They don't show them for regular verbs. So for example, for taron, they don't show the infix position because they just assume you know it. But they show it for irregular words. And that's, for example, here in Dignatvi, there you see the 2-2. What that means is that both infixes go into the second syllable. So both go into the peng. For taron, this dictionary doesn't show anything because taron just uses the normal rules. So you can find it out yourself. The same also goes for the annotate dictionary. There we have exactly the same. It doesn't show it for verbs like taron, where it's regular, but it shows it for ralpeng, for example, where everything goes into the second syllable. So there again, they show it with a 2-2, meaning that both infix positions go into syllable 2. So, big question, what infixes are there? It's actually a lot, but less than you would think, I guess. This picture, by the way, is not made by me. I just translated it into English. But here's all the infixes that exist. Now you would think, that's a lot, but actually it's not. Because you see these boxes in the middle, these are all just combined infixes, and they literally are just combinations of the 3 boxes above, and you don't really need to learn them because they're just logically derived from them. So it's actually far less than you would think. And there you also see which infix position they belong to. So 0, 1, and 2. What we will talk about today is this, the tense. So im, am, ihr, and I. The perfect and imperfect, so if an action is finished or unfinished, ol and er. And we will also talk about the determined future because it kind of belongs to a tense. So isje and asje. So, like you see, everything we will talk about today is position 1. Let's start with our first infixes. So tense, when does something happen? We will use the verb hahau, to sleep. Here you see the infix positions, so they're just in front of the 2 A's. Like I said today, everything we learn about is position 1. So here's some English sentences with our verb hahau, and here's what they become in Natvi. Everything you have to do is you take your infix, you look up in which position it goes, so we learned that the tense infixes go into position 1. Then you take your verb, look up where the position 1 is, and then you just fill in that position with the infix. So our basic sentence, I sleep, of course, just as oe hahau or hahau oe. I mixed the word orders here, but of course for all sentences, both word orders are fine. If I want to say I slept in the past, then I say hamahau oe. So I just put the arm into the dot or to the dot where position 1 is. I just slept, so recently. Oe hemahau. I will sleep. Hayahau oe, so I, future. I will sleep soon. Oe hiyahau, so ihr is our soon or near future. I will sleep, determined. Hasyahau oe. So asya, here you see it's like the I, but there's just an S in the middle. Hasyahau is that if you're really determined that you will sleep. And we have the same also for the near part, so you see the ihr was the near past. And then we have is here with an S in the middle. That's the near past. So I will soon sleep. I'm determined I will soon sleep. So basically what almost everyone says at about 2 a.m. in Discord without ever doing it. So tense infixes are position 1 infixes. So you just put them into position 1 and you are done. Here's again an overview over the tense infixes. So you see past always has a M in it. The future always has a Y in it. And then for near or recent, you insert the E. So we get im and E. And for general or far, you just insert the A. And that's how they're built up. By the way, it's completely dependent on context and what you want to use, if you need to use the general or the near or recent. I have the feeling that often the near or recent is used if you want to stress that something is happening soon or it just happened a moment ago. But also, like I said, it's completely up to context. If I tell you a story about something that happened thousands of years ago and then I talk about last week, in comparison, that's very recently then. But if I now talk about yesterday and then talk about last week, then suddenly it's far away. So there is no actual rule for when to use the near and recent ones. Just do what feels right for you. That's literally the whole rule here. Yeah, context and word stress. That's two important things to consider with infixes, especially here with tense. So what you always have to keep in mind is that you don't need the tense infixes if it's clear from context. That actually goes for many infixes, that you don't need them if it's clear from context. For example, also the aspect we will talk about later. Some infixes are required by grammar, but tense infixes you can very often leave out. The Na'vi don't like to say things twice. So for example, dram oehahau, yesterday I slept. The dram already says it's in the past, so why would I need the past infix here to show that? We already know that. Same also for drai oehahau, tomorrow I will sleep. Here we have adverbs showing the time already, but actually also if we don't have these adverbs in the sentence, but it's already clear from context that you are talking about the past or future, you still don't need the infix in the sentence. So when you're telling a story about something that happened last week, then you need the tense maybe once at the beginning to set the context to make clear it's in the past, and then you can just use the bare verb afterwards. So context does a lot in Na'vi, and you can leave a lot of stuff out. Then, word stress. That's very important if you actually want to learn to speak Na'vi. Word stress, it doesn't change with the infixes. So we have ha-how. It's stressed on the first R. Ha-how, not ha-how, ha-how. If I now insert the am infix, for example, it becomes ha-ma-how. What you see here is that not the vowel from the infix is stressed. So it's not ha-ma-how, it's ha-ma-how. So basically, the R that is stressed is the original R that also was stressed. That's the ha-how, ha-ma-how. There are two exceptions to that, because of course there are exceptions. Those are inan and omum. Without infixes, they sound like this. Inan, omum. But if you now add any infixes to them, the stress shifts to the first syllable. So not the first syllable of the complete word. So you see it's not the infix that's stressed here, but to the first syllable of the original verb. So in case of the inan, it shifts to the E. So inan, aminan. Same happens to the omum. Omum, amomum. This happens with all infixes for these two verbs. So let's talk about aspect. Aspect is something that tells you if an action is finished or ongoing. Let's just look at it. We have oe for the finished action. Oe holahau, I have slept. The action is completed. And er for the unfinished action. Oe herahau, I am sleeping. The action is not completed. If you're active in Discord, then you probably know the HRH, which means lol. It's an abbreviation that's very often used from the community. And that one actually comes from herangham. Hangham means to laugh. So herangham means to be laughing. So basically, I am laughing. It's exactly that. It's this R infix. And this is how HRH came to be. So maybe if you paid attention very closely, you are now a bit confused what happens if you put these in front of pseudovowels. Just as a repetition, pseudovowels are the double L and double R, and R. And yeah, the ol ends in L and the R ends in an R. So we would get like 3 times L and 3 times R there, right? So will it look like this? So plte plus ol becomes polte or something like that? No. The double L disappears here. So we get polte. But now something weird happens. If I have vrfen and I put R in it, it doesn't become verfen, of course. It becomes vrfen. So here the infix disappears. So what happens here? Why does plte plus ol become polte? So the pseudovowel disappears and the infix stays. But vrfen plus R becomes vrfen. So the infix disappears. There is actually a logical answer to this, and this is word stress. So you see, plte is stressed on the second syllable. Plte, plte. And because the pseudovowel, so the double L here, is not stressed, it disappears. And the infix stays, so we get polte. But in vrfen, actually the pseudovowel, so the double R, is stressed. It's vrfen, vrfen. And because of this, it stays, and the infix disappears. So vrfen can actually mean both, to visit and to be visiting. If we have a one-syllable verb with a pseudovowel, then this actually counts as unstressed. So vl plus ol becomes vol, and nr plus r becomes ner. So maybe some of you are now wondering, what is the difference between ol and am? Because holahau I slept, hamahau I slept, what's the difference? And this can be a bit tricky to understand, but let's look at some examples and yeah, see if we can make sense of it. What is important to understand is that ol and r, so the aspect, finished and unfinished action, are actually independent from time. The tense infix we had before, so also am, set the action on a timeline. So basically they say if it's in the past, is it now, or is it in the future. But the aspect infixes, so ol and r, actually don't do that. All they say is if something is finished or not. So, for example, let's look at r first. R, of course, for most time, oi herahau, I am sleeping. That sounds like I'm sleeping right now. But it can also be in the past or in the future. Dram, oi herahau. Yesterday, I was sleeping. So it's an unfinished action in the past. Drai, oi herahau. Tomorrow, I will be sleeping. It's an unfinished action in the future. So you see, R has nothing to do with time. It can be in the past, in the future, or right now. And even though that can be hard to grasp, it's the same for ol. We most often see ol used as past, because if something is finished, and if you're talking about something that's finished, then most often that will be in the past, but you can also use ol in the future. That's possible. So for example, te engit wel tolel agr, when I received an answer, I ngaru payeng, I will tell you. So at the time when I will have received an answer in the future, then I will tell you. So it's finished action in the future because when that has happened, when that is finished. So you see, here we use ol to talk about the future. But Natvi tends to mark us aspect, so if something is finished or unfinished, more than tense. And ol actually is very often used to render a past tense, so ol is very often used to talk about the past tense, which is why many people often forget that it actually doesn't need to be in the past. So this is the difference between ol and am. Ol only says that something is finished. It can be in the future, it can be in the past, mostly it's in the past. Am only says that something is in the past, so it only puts the event on a timeline in the past. Same for I and ihr, they only put an event on the timeline in the future. So, Let's look at this very small summary. Let's review all the infixes we learned. First we had am. Am is just the general past. And we had im, which is the recent past. Then we have I, which is the general future. And we have ir, which is the near future. Together with these, we also had asir, determined future, I'm determined to do this. And isir, determined near future. I'm determined I will soon do this. I'm determined I will soon work on this video. All we had as the finished action and er as the unfinished action. And, very important, remember all these are position 1 infixes. So they go into position 1. And that's already it. If you have questions, like always, feel free to ask them in the comments, or you can also contact me on Discord. I hope you had some fun and this was a good, helpful introduction for you into infixes, and I hope I see you for the next one. Hi, Yellow.